Welcome, everyone, to the Monday, September 21st meeting of the MSAD 6 Board of Directors. Mrs. Smith, would you please call the roll?
Julie Anderson.
Present.
Lindsay Atkinson. Julie Bruning. Here. Nathan Carlo.
Present.
Erica Croy. Here. Robert Deacon.
Here.
Ellen Dakota.
Here.
Trevor Houston.
Present.
Donald Moran.
Here.
James Moses.
Excused.
John Sullivan.
Present.
Tina Kovac.
The student rep terms have expired, so they shouldn't be on the roll call.
We have quorum with 10 members present.
Thank you very much. Would you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. I'll accept a motion to approve the agenda. Moved by Mr. Carlo, seconded by Mr. Sargent. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? It is unanimous. We do not have any public comment this evening, and our student representatives are not present, so we'll move right into the consent agenda. We have approval of the following minutes: September 8th, 2020, regular board meeting; September 14th, 2020, special board meeting; teacher appointments for the 2020-2021 school year: Brooke Lee, secondary teacher, business education at the high school; Dara Oya, school nurse, 1 year at Bonnie Eagle High School; high school co-curricular appointments for the 2020-2021 school year: BEGSTA co-advisors, Dana Jarvis and Randa Thomas; civil rights team advisor, Elizabeth Hayden; JV golf coach, John Trull; major play director, fall and one-act plays director, Marianne Pillsbury; World Language Club, Elizabeth Mazerazzi; History Club Model UN advisor, Kelsey Dolan; Key Club advisor, Melissa McKenzie; math team co-advisors, Elizabeth Hayden and Faye Prescott; National Honor Society advisor, Jennifer Moran; newspaper advisor, Joanne Lannon; student council co-advisors, Donna Sear and Cole Phillips; lead class advisor, Selena Levitt; freshman class advisor, Andrew Price; sophomore class advisor, Rosalind Deptula; junior class advisor, Mark Liddiff; senior class advisor, Justin Cobley. And that is it for the consent agenda. I'll accept a motion. Moved by Mrs. Croyd, seconded by Mr. Sargent. Is there any discussion?
Just one.
Mr. Penna.
Yeah, just to let you know that Dara Oja will be assigned to Georgie Jack. We had 2 applicants for those positions, nursing positions. One is backed out and is going to actually become a sub, so Dara is going to be assigned to Georgie Jack when she gets on board, I think by the end of next week, definitely by the first week of October. But the high school position is designed to be the rotation if we need extra help elsewhere, because there'll be 2 RNs there. But just for purposes of tonight's meeting, Dara will be assigned to Georgie Jack as it stands right now.
Great. Thank you. Is there any other discussion? Seeing Mr. Deacon.
I'd just like to thank you for adjusting the minutes as I had suggested. Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? It is unanimous. And for my report this evening, I want to thank everyone for who was able to attend our special board meeting workshop on September 14th with our administrative team. I do appreciate the administrators taking the time out of their schedules to come to the board and have these discussions, and do appreciate all the hard work that they are doing on behalf of our students. They will be coming back before the board either next month or early in November, so that we can get a final look at their goals and then vote to approve those. So more to come on that in the near future. Included in your packets this evening is the save the date for the 47th Annual MSMA Virtual Fall Conference held on Friday, October 30th and Saturday the 31st. We do encourage you all to attend, and please do contact Mrs. Smith by October 7th if you do so. Does anyone have any questions or comments for me this evening? Seeing none, Mr. Penna, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I want to just update the support staff, new hires and resignations. You'll find those in your packets, the small list of those. Donations, I want to thank Linda Short of Buxton for a donation of 140 homemade masks to benefit the students and staff of Buxton Center Elementary School, approximately the value of $700. And thank you for Direct Construction LLC of Lyman for a donation of outdoor toys to benefit Miss Van Zant's classroom at Buxton Center Elementary School. Thanks to DonorsChoose.org for a donation of $636.71 to support the Triptych Coding Adventure program in Miss Tripp's classroom at Bonnie Eagle Middle School. Thank you for Ronald and Bonita Usher of Buxton for a donation of $300 to benefit the MSAD 6 District Backpack Program. And thank you to 320 Inc. LLC for a donation of $3,000 to benefit the district's backpack program. As far as the update on the other information, you would like to know that, updates on teaching of the Constitution. In grade 4, the standard is civics, of where they cover that. And they explain the origins, functions, structures of different systems of government, including those created by the U.S. Constitution as well as state constitutions. In grade 5, the standard still falls under civics. Examine the origins and purpose of rules, laws, and key U.S. constitutional provisions. Special events for Constitutional Day schools included watching online student hall meeting with Justice Neil Gorsuch. Completed an online Constitution Day provided by betterlessons.com. Some instruction and discussions around preamble of the U.S. Constitution. In grade 6, the standard moves to social studies. They analyze of democratic ideals in U.S. Constitution principles that include the rule of law, legitimate power, common good, and the rights, duties, and responsibilities of citizens. In grade 7, the social studies standards trace and explain the history of the democratic ideals and U.S. constitutional principles, and their importance in the history of the United States and the world. In grade 8, social studies standard as well, describe the protection of individuals and minority rights as described in the United States Constitution and Bill of Rights, and analyze examples of protection of rights in court cases and/or current events. Social studies standards trace and explain the history of democratic ideals and U.S. constitutional principles and the importance in the history of the U.S. and the world. Again, they repeat that. Again, they do it in elementary school and middle school. Middle school, again, some special events. A reminder that the district has supported a naturalization ceremony held at both the middle school and at the high school. They switch back and forth with student body representation. Last week, the grade 6 students learned about the rights as citizens and about the activities planned for the week during last week. In grade 7, they learned about the preamble of the Constitution with the goal of reciting it back to their teacher with 100% accuracy. And the 8th graders were invited to help with raising the flag at the start of school. In the high school, U.S. history curriculum at grade 10 covers the U.S. Constitution and amendments, as well as in the government course required during students' junior year prior to registering to vote. In the daily announcements last week at the high school about the U.S. Constitution and September 17th were provided by the Social Studies Department. And so that covers the work that we do with our curriculum around the Constitution. So if I can stop there in case there are any questions. I have a little additional information from my report that's not related to that particular curriculum question.
Are there any questions on Constitution Day? Mr. Deacon?
Not so much a question, but as to thank you for sharing this information with us today. We weren't expecting the question at the last prior meeting, but I do appreciate all of the efforts of the staff to ensure that our students become good citizens by understanding our form of government and our Constitution. Thank you very much for all that you do and all that the staff do.
Thank you. And we were able to get around, I was, and I know Lori was as well, able to get around to see, as the principals were, to see the activities of the week and of the day. The town hall, Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch was really interesting. I happened to be at Hollis for that day, but there was a number of things going on that teachers had already planned to work through. So it was quite an impressive, busy day working on the Constitution. So just for additional information, I just want to let the board know the backpack program will begin this week. Food is distributed by the high school Jobs for Maine grads. Next week, sorry, yes. It's going to begin next week. But in that program, for anyone that, like as of last year when we changed it, the Jobs for Maine grads at the high school, will maintain that program where food goes there, and they do distributions from the high school, and then our maintenance department supports us by moving it within the buildings, and then to the building coordinators, and then that's how it gets out to students. And I want to do a reminder that all meals are free to students. So we want to encourage them to take advantage of the nutritious program offered by our cafeteria. On Tuesdays and Thursdays from 4 to 6 p.m., meals are free to children 18 years or under and can sign up on a Google Doc on the nutrition website. Pickup locations are at Buxton Center, Bonnie Eagle Middle School, and HB Emory. And as we talked about at the last meeting, centrally located for people who have increased access. I just want to let the board know as well that we have we're working on our instruction in red, not that we intend to want to go there, but Lori in the curriculum department and special ed will be developing a schedule for staff professional development, which is our next step in the process, that we have a good plan out there. We need to then establish our expectations for instruction if the event we have to go red.
Did you want me to add to that about PD or not?
Yeah, you certainly, I was gonna have you do that more when we go to the hybrid plan in October. Yeah, because that's when we're gonna change that's the calendar issue that we'll talk about when we get to the item 10. Yeah.
Are there any questions or comments for the superintendent of schools? Seeing none, again, the floor is yours for the adjustment to the 2020-2021 school year calendar to maintain the yellow level plan for the month of October.
Thank you. So our current plan is working, and it is my recommendation that we continue the hybrid yellow plan for the month of October. We are recommending that October 9th, Teacher in Service Day, staff will be in person in response to the staff planning needs, and we have consulted with facilities, so they're well aware of our need requirement. And so Lori's been doing a lot of work with staff and connecting with them, and so I'm going to let her talk a little bit more about, it doesn't change anything on the calendar for October, but thinking ahead, we may want to come back to the board if we continue this model for November, because November on our staff development, professional development day, we want to, again, that's why it's going to be in building. We have some specific things we want to be able to do to support our staff. And she can talk a lot more about the work that she's been doing in the buildings and getting a handle on the challenges that our teachers are facing, and we need to be responsive to that.
So I spent some time in visiting schools in the last few weeks, ever since we opened, and a lot of time at the high school and at Buxton Center School last week, actually sitting down and talking with teachers, trying to get a handle on what our needs are. I think that it's really important to know that teaching in a hybrid model is very different than a traditional model or even remote instruction like we did last spring. So we were thankful to have those couple of extra days with teachers before school started, but they're working really hard to develop meaningful lessons for both, because now they're planning each week for in-person, independent, and remote Fridays. And the instructional coaches and the administrators have been amazing at providing resources and training. And Friday mornings, because we have that little bit of time before they go online with kids, or Friday afternoons in elementary, are packed with professional development. So they're really looking forward to the October 9th workshop day, where they'll be able to actually meet in person on site in small groups with all the rules, but so they can kind of continue to build their repertoire and develop some instructional units. We still need to provide ongoing professional development in the social and emotional learning category that we started in August. And we still need to, we haven't dug in with teachers on what things will look like when instruction in the red happens in their remote, if they had to be remote 5 days a week, which we really need to be prepared for. So we're kind of waiting. We're going to take that October 9th workshop day and dig in. And I think it'll be a really, by the time we get there, they're going to be very ready for some additional support and some group work. But I think at that point, the curriculum director and I will review what's, and figure out what the training needs are moving forward. We're getting the feeling that we may be asking down the road for another workshop day, maybe in November or as needed, to really help people work on lessons and units. Everything has to be different. It isn't like you can do the same activities you do when you're in person 5 days a week, and it's not the same as what we did in the spring when we were just sort of flying by the seat of our pants. So to really do high-quality things that kids can do independently on those off days, and to make sure you're maximizing your time when you have them in person, and then figuring out how to bring all the kids together on Friday for a remote day and have it really be impactful and not just thrown together again, is a lot of work. So I think we're just going to wait and see what happens, but we may be coming back and asking for kids to have an extra independent day at some point, so that teachers could collaborate and get some more training.
Very good. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept the recommendation of the superintendent of schools. Yeah, Mrs. Atkinson?
Okay, yes, so the plan, you're recommending that we stay in the hybrid for the month of October?
Yes,
What information is basing this recommendation?
that we can't transport the students into school. We're still limited to the number of transportation. And we are just getting into the model that we're currently into. So we can't really change our plan because we can't transport the students.
Can we
If we wanted
survey-
to increase, or if we wanted, we could go all red.
Can we survey the parents and see if transportation is an option?
We've
Personal
already got,
transportation.
Done that, yeah.
we've already done that, and we've already got 40% of, we've already asked every single parent to drive that can drive. I think there's other pieces to it, like, we don't have the space in all of our buildings for kids. You have to be 6 feet apart to eat. You can't eat in the cafeteria 3 feet apart. You can't eat in the classroom 3 feet apart. You can't take your masks off. So like schools that have all students in the room can't take masks off at all, so then they have to figure out. So we have a lot of limitations that we still need to work out, and our teachers are just getting used to this routine, just barely settling in. So,
Well, I'm not so much concerned about settling in a routine as much as I'm concerned about getting the students back into school full-time as fast as possible. So the fact that they're not in a routine doesn't really concern me. I'd like to know what steps we need to take to get this to happen.
We don't have this, well, we need space. So that's our recommendation for the month of October. We don't have the space to move. I mean, we're lucky we can feed the high school students with the current students that are coming in. And that means they have to take up the gym to do that. And we don't know what's gonna happen if the weather turns bad in October, November.
So can the children eat in shifts, or
They are
how
eating in
long
shifts.
are we looking at roughly for when this can happen?
No idea. I mean, that's according to the governor or DOE. We have to work by
and
their
right now, York
regulations.
County is still yellow anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, so forgive my ignorance, but are we operating under Cumberland County or York? Okay, so Cumberland is green. My recommendation is that we bring the children back to school.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Deacon?
I'll just throw this out, which I don't recommend, is those of us who have a little bit more history may have grown up in an era when there were double sessions, and schools doubled their capacity by running double sessions. And I don't recommend that, but you could have half the students for half the day in class and the other half for another half a day. It's a terrible way to run things, and it's an awful burden on families, I can tell you that. So I don't recommend that as a course of action. And I appreciate the prudence and the intelligent way that the administration and the staff are handling this based on appropriate considerations for the safety and health of students and staff. Thank you for that.
Yeah, we certainly, are looking and have had conversations about potentially some other options. I also lived in a double session environment. I know how to run them. I've organized them before. It's possible. I think one of the parents were very clear on saying to us when we established this plan for this month, is that they wanted consistency. Whatever we established, that they wanted a plan that was consistent. So whatever we do next, again, we can survey our parents again, but we need to make sure that whatever that is, parents can support that and manage that in their own schedules about their own daily lives. So double sessions, definitely something that, I thought about and I've actually done before, but before we do anything, we'll have to at least see what the ability is of transportation to make those things happen, number one. And then, again, there's a lot of work to go through. We have bargaining units and agreements in all of our schools, so we have to work with them and meet and consult before we make any changes to the regular school day or that structure. So these things, should this continue on even longer, it certainly will be discussed at the administrative level about what our alternatives may be. But currently, our recommendation is to stay yellow in our plan that is moving successfully forward when we know communities around us are not moving successfully forward.
Are there any other questions or comments, Mrs. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So has there been any re-asking of parents if, after this last month, if their kids want to come back to in-person? Has that been asked of them again? Do we know that data?
We haven't re-asked that question based on what we already just asked to set up for September. We haven't, again, put that question back out to parents.
I faintly remember, and I could be wrong, I feel like at the last the board meeting a month ago, I asked whether, like, if we were truly green, would we be able to handle, would the district be able to do social distancing for all the kids? And I faintly remember you saying that we could, and that the only reason that we couldn't was because of transportation. But the most recent letter that came out from the Department of Education and DHHS in regards to the response to the MPA, and their letter on September 1st, it says here that the Department of Education framework for PK through 12 schools makes an exception to the 6-foot distance rule for children in classrooms and bus transportation. So would that not allow
But it
our
wouldn't allow
district-
us to feed them. That's for in-class instruction, which our kids are currently doing, that they are keeping their masks on throughout the day, as well as with shields, except with mask breaks and other things, but they have to remove their masks during mealtime.
So now
And
it's
so,
just.
and
the-
even on the buses, they're not 6 feet on the buses, right? But they are limited on the number that they can put on the bus. Yeah, and when you talked about truly green, I think we may have had different interpretations of what we meant as truly green. I am an advocate as soon as possible to get the students safely back to school under the guidelines of CDC and the DOE, which I operate under.
Right, I guess I'm
Yeah.
just kind of confused at that statement, because it makes it sound like if you could fit 2 to a seat with their masks on, then that's acceptable.
It is, so they give guidelines, but but then there's other pieces to consider. Another piece to consider is what happens if there's a case, and that one of the advantages to having the hybrid model is now you have cohorts of students. And for example, if kids are sitting 2 to a seat on the bus and someone on that bus tests positive, automatically that whole bus is now quarantined for 2 weeks regardless of masks.
And everyone
So,
that they're
and everyone in a
associated with.
classroom with a student is automatically quarantined if there's a positive case in that classroom, regardless of masks and rules. So there's different rules for classrooms than there are for workplaces and other places. We can't go by just the close contact rule. Or intimate contact rule. We have to automatically quarantine a whole classroom. So if we bring 20, the smaller groups allows us to stay cohorted and keep kids separate, so that if and when a case does come up, we may not have to close the whole school or close down a district. We might be able to just close a pocket or put a certain amount of kids on quarantine, on home instruction for a little bit.
Are there any other questions? Mrs. Atkinson?
But just to clarify, there are a certain amount of kids in the rec program who are in opposite days who are still actively in the school, correct?
They're physically isolated from the rest of the school. They only use the gym, and the school doesn't use the gym, so.
But they're there, present in the same building as the students that you're trying to keep separate?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is there any other discussion? I'll entertain a motion to approve the recommendation. Moved by Mr. Sargent, seconded by Mr. Marian. All in favor? Opposed? 2 opposed, the motion passes. I'll now turn the floor over again to Mr. Penna for a consideration of a resolution granting the Bonnie Eagle High School principal the flexibility to waive graduation requirements for students in the class of 2021 whose access to learning was impeded by circumstances due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you, and the principal, Ms. Applestein, is here. You may want to ask him some questions, but I think that this is the same resolution that we, and I can read that to you. It's the same resolution that we passed last spring in order to support our highest need students in order to ensure that they can meet graduation. Would you prefer that I read each one of those off to you, or have you read them, or would you rather hear from Mr. Applestein?
I don't think we need to read the resolution.
Yep.
Board members have had it for 5 or 6 days now. Mr. Applestein, if there's anything you'd like to add, or if any board members have a question, now's the time. Mrs. Anderson?
Might it be helpful for people listening, like in the district or watching, to read what it means? I'm just, if I weren't here, I'd kind of be interested in hearing it personally, but.
Yep, it is available on our website, but I am more than happy to read it off if that has been requested. Whereas each student in MS-86 has access to varying degrees of academic and emotional support outside of the regular school setting, whereas consistent internet access is not guaranteed for all students during the COVID-19 pandemic, whereas many adolescents were required to work essential jobs during the COVID-19 pandemic that limited access to instruction during school hours, Whereas the remote learning modalities being employed by MS-86 during the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly in the spring of 2020, may not have yet met the needs of all students with varying learning styles. Therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Directors of Maine School Administrative District Number 6, during a regular board meeting on September 21st, 2020, hereby grants the Bonnie Eagle High School principal the power to waive certain graduation requirements for students whose access to learning was impeded by circumstances due to the COVID-19 pandemic, provided that the student makes a formal request for an exception, earns at least 21.5 credits, and meets all of the diploma requirements outlined by the Maine Department of Education. The Bonnie Eagle High School principal will hear each request individually and consider the circumstances that were beyond the student's control as well as their academic progress before the COVID-19 pandemic began. Therefore, be it resolved that this resolution shall be placed on file with the records of the Board of Directors located at the office of the Superintendent of Schools, and a copy shall be placed within the minutes of this meeting. Mrs. Bruni?
And I apologize, is this similar to, like, from a college standpoint, right? So you might not have your requirements prior to graduation date, and then you finish them, or this is that they would
No.
finish without
This
being
is
able?
finished without,
this is-
these are elective courses. These are
So-
not required courses.
So what we did, this is the same resolution that you guys passed last spring for the class of 2020. And what we realized during last spring is that there were students who just were not successful. Things we've actually, I think, fixed now, and it'll be better. I don't think this is a forever issue. But last spring, we had a lot of students, we didn't have the hotspots from the state, so there were students without internet access. There were students who, because it happened so quickly and no parents had time to make arrangements, there were a lot of high school students who were taking care of siblings during the day and not able to do their own work. Kids working essential jobs at grocery stores during the day. So we looked at that, and like students who were on track to graduate, but because they had a really tough trimester last spring, and maybe didn't pass all of their classes, are now not poised to graduate on time. So because that gives them a real disadvantage, so this resolution just allows, like, we went through, Greg and I and a couple of other folks sat down, Lenny Holmes, the director of alternative ed, in particular, those kids very much struggled last spring with the online environment. And we looked at the data. So we knew that we had this amendment for the class of 2020. I don't know if there were maybe half a dozen students in the spring that got a COVID diploma. I don't have the exact data. We called it the COVID diploma, but that's not what it said. It said Bonnie Eagle High School diploma. And then, but we looked at the current class of 2021, and we have at least 19 students in that class who were on track to graduate, but then because they did not pass or meet their standards in the third trimester in the spring, are now not going to be able to fit everything they need to graduate on time. And it's due to things that were beyond their control. So that is the reason for the resolution. And Greg's nodding, but Mr. Applestein, if you want to come up and add anything to that.
Yeah, I can, certainly. From where I sit, it's about equity and access to a variety of different things. As Lori and Paul had mentioned, some students certainly don't have internet, and we're trying to get them the hotspots that they need to be able to connect remotely on Fridays. As is outlined in the proposal, I think there were a variety of extenuating circumstances clearly in the spring. I was in another district at the time. We went through the same thing. And so from where I sit, providing equal access to the opportunities that are before them when that gets compromised due to having to work to help support the family, keep an eye on their siblings when they're home doing their independent days, that can certainly get in the way of students really being successful. And it's the difference of 2.5 credits. In effect, you could say it comes out in the wash with electives, but there is a reduction in math, science, not in English, of course. There's still 4 years of English. And I don't know whether all of you received the SOP related to it, but it's a nice outline that Lori provided that gives a breakdown of what they still have to do to be able to graduate with a Bonnie Eagle diploma.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept the recommendation of the superintendent, moved by Mr. Sargent, seconded by Mr. McNeil. All in favor? It is unanimous. Appointment of Alan Thomas as Bonnie Eagle High School Fine Arts Department Chair for 2020-2021 school year, Mr. Penna?
Yep, thank you. I recommend that Alan Thomas be the department chair for fine arts, who's a veteran teacher at the high school, and filling a position from a retired teacher.
Do I have a motion? Moved by Mr. Carlo, seconded by Mrs. Dakota. Is there any discussion? Mr. Carlo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there a stipend that's associated with this position?
There is.
What's the stipend?
I don't know off the top of my head. It's what? Yeah, well, yeah, sorry, right. It is based, sorry, yes, it is based on a formula of years of experience, and there's a whole formula within the contract that outlines what he would get specifically. It's not a standard, every department member gets like X amount of $1,000.
Okay, so do we have to vote on an expenditure of money?
No.
Okay.
No, it's in the teacher's
It's in the teacher
contract, which has been
contract,
previously
yes.
approved.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? It is unanimous. Appointment of Haley Johnson as lead teacher at Buxton Center Elementary School for the 2020-2021 school year. Mr. Penna?
Yeah, and that vacancy has occurred because Molly Majoni moved to the interim assistant principal position. So there's a vacancy that created, there structured as well.
Do I have a motion to accept the recommendation? Moved by Mr. Sargent, seconded by Mrs. Freites. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? It is unanimous. Approval of Anna Bennett to serve on the certification steering committee as a representative for Buxton Center Elementary School. No. My microphone wasn't on, apologize for that. Approval of Anna Bennett to serve on the certification steering committee as a representative for Buxton Center Elementary School for the term of September 22nd, 2020 through June 30th, 2020. Mr. Penna?
And that is my recommendation in order for her to, again, there's a team of people, there's an entire committee. We need another member on that to serve, to support teachers in the certification process. Yep.
Do I have a motion? Moved by Mr. Carlo, seconded by Mr. Sargent. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? It is unanimous.
Just for the new membership, or maybe even others that don't know, the steering committee, like, everything is done at a local level at this point, so you have a plan, you get it approved by your steering committee, they approve it, and then that's what moves you forward in the certification process. So it's all done at the local level, when you're doing a plan. So that's why every community has to have steering committees at every level. We have an administrative one, there's a teacher one, so that's how the process works on overseeing the teachers are doing what they need to do in order to be recertified.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Mr. Marine for the September 16th Finance and Facilities Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wednesday, the 16th, we met at 4 o'clock here at Central Office. Mr. Brockman introduced to us Kelly LaPlante. She's a new addition to the business office. Mrs. LaPlante's being contracted to the Robert Half Agency as a staff accountant, and will be focusing on the CARES Act funding. And there is potential that we may get reimbursed for that from the CARE Fund. Excuse me. There were no public comments. Eric Curtis, Mr. Curtis, the athletic director, came before the committee and wanted to use some of the gate receipts for broadcasting field hockey and boys and girls soccer. After some discussion and the presentation of Mr. Curtis, we approved $2,500 to contract with the Sauk River Television to televise these games, and there's a possibility that that money could come back to the gate fund from the CARE Act funding. Mr. Brockman thinks that's possible. We had the facilities update. The director and the assistant director weren't able to come that day, but they sent us a written report, which was very complete and quite lengthy, and a lot of the things that they're doing to keep us ready and in line for the COVID issues. We discussed the Gorham Savings Bank lease purchase proposal for 4 vehicles that was approved by the board in September 14th of 2020. There are 4 vehicles in the lease. We moved to approve that and put it into action. We approved the payroll and the accounts payable warrants, and we reviewed the top 25 items in the payables warrant. Mr. Brockman enlightened us on what those represented. The only other discussion that we had was the VW grant fund that Mr. Brockman said that we were going to get 2 new 2022 Bluebird 77 passenger buses, propane buses. The purchase of the buses is $217,000, and our share of that is going to be $60,908, which is a great deal for the district. and it also helps to improve our fleet. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Marian? Mrs. Bruni?
And I don't know if Mr. Curtis talked about this, but is there a reason, so I think about field hockey, right, like they're on a different field, but for boys and girls soccer, like I thought that we have the video cameras like on the stadium field so that they were being broadcast through the national NFHS or whatever. Is there a reason why those are that's not being used versus having Saco River TV? Do you know?
I do not know the answer to that. If Mr. Curtis were here, I'm sure that he could fill you in on it.
Okay, I can ask him. I'll see
Yeah,
him
I don't
tomorrow,
think,
so.
I think it's not as clear as we can get with the video production. Like, it's gonna be harder to follow the game with that one camera than it is to have a team on the ground. I think that's the issue.
Okay.
Yeah. And covering all of the events. The only place that the field can be covered will be but the other fields can't be covered. if
Right,
there's
like I
other
know
game.
stadium.
Right. The
Yeah.
stadium's the only place it will be covered, if we
Okay.
use that system. And I know that he wanted to have a little bit better access and total access for all athletics, as opposed to just what's on the stadium field.
And will it be just varsity games versus sub-varsity? Just varsity?
Yeah, we're not really sure how sub-varsity is gonna actually work right now.
Okay.
Transportation is another issue with that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Deacon?
Just a question on process. Isn't it appropriate for board members to go through the chair and the superintendent before contacting other administrators?
I personally have no issue with board members contacting administrators. They should, of course, CC the superintendent and myself in those communications.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, the chair recognizes Mr. Carlo for the Policy Committee report of September 8th.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Policy Committee met on September 8th at 4:30 at Central Office. We reviewed several procedures and policies that had been recommended for review, the first of which was ACR, Grievance Procedure for Persons with Disabilities. Dr. Katie Hawes, the Director of Special Services, made no changes, and she accepted the MSMA suggested procedure. The next policy that we reviewed was ACAA, Harassment and Sexual Harassment of Students. These changes were in consequence of changes in federal Title IX statute. She informed the committee that they needed to be amended due to a change in the law. We also, for the board's understanding, we approved a rule revision at our policy committee meeting earlier this afternoon. And the next policy that we reviewed was AC, non-discrimination and equal opportunity and affirmative action. We moved to accept the MSMA sample policy for that topic. And the next policy that we reviewed was ACAB, harassment and sexual harassment of school employees. We accepted I believe we accepted the MSMA version of that as well. We adjourned at 5:07, and that's my report.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments for the Policy Committee? Seeing none, Mr. Carlo, do you have anything to add for first reading?
We did not make any changes, so no.
Okay. Is there any questions or comments from the board on the policies for first reading? Seeing none, on Wednesday, September 23rd, we have a Negotiations Committee meeting at 4:30 in the conference room. Wednesday, September 30th, Negotiations Committee meeting at 4:30. And Monday, October 5th, 2020, we have a Policy Committee meeting at 4:30 and a regular board meeting at 6 o'clock. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Mr. Sargent, seconded by Mrs. Dakotas. All in favor? It is unanimous. Have a good night, everyone.